Welcome everyone, security officials, diplomats, and geopolitical analysts. Thanks for joining this executive briefing. Today's explainer is diving into what I can only describe as a massive geopolitical earthquake, the absolute fracturing of the old Middle Eastern security model. For decades, the region operated under a very specific, predictable set of rules, heavily reliant on Western powers. But as we'll see today, that old rulebook, it's been completely torn up. We're literally witnessing the birth of entirely new alliances and unprecedented defense strategies right before our eyes.
Okay, let's dive right into our structure for today. We'll start with the shifting paradigm, move into the Russia and Iran dynamic, explore the Gulf strategic divide, zoom in on the UAE's defense stance, and finally, map out the future security architecture.
Section 1. The shifting paradigm. This is the end of the US-only model.
The absolute core thesis of our briefing today boils down to this. The Middle East needs to rely on the Middle East. Honestly, the era of total, unquestioning reliance on an external Western power, specifically the United States, to act as the ultimate security guarantor is officially over. Regional players have realized that if they're going to survive, they literally have to take matters into their own hands.
So, how did we get here? Well, for decades prior to 2019, the Gulf states operated pretty comfortably under the U.S. security umbrella. It was predictable. But then 2019 happened, and we saw those devastating drone and missile attacks on the Saudi Abqaiq oil facilities. And you know, the real shock wasn't just the attack itself, it was the fact that there was almost zero military reaction from Washington. That moment right there served as the ultimate wake-up call. It forced Gulf states to radically rethink their survival strategies, leading us straight into our present era of regional self-reliance and, frankly, some really surprising new partnerships.
Which brings us to Section 2, Russia and Iran, a pragmatic alliance.
And this brilliantly illustrates the evolution we're seeing. Think back to the Soviet era. Ayatollah Khomeini looked at the atheist Soviet Union with intense ideological suspicion. It was hardly a warm friendship. Then, in the 90s, a cash-strapped Russia starts selling arms and weapon designs to Tehran. But the real game changer, the moment the power dynamic totally flipped, was 2022. Following its invasion of Ukraine and the massive international isolation that followed, Russia suddenly found itself absolutely desperate for cheap, effective Iranian drones. The dependency literally reversed.
And that leads us to this number, 25. You've probably seen the headlines. Russia and Iran recently signed this bombastic 25-year strategic agreement. It sounds incredibly intimidating on paper, doesn't it? But here is what you really need to take away from this. It's all about what the agreement crucially leaves out. It does not oblige Russia to actively defend Iran if Iran gets attacked. That is a massive caveat, and it completely defines the true nature of their relationship.
Because of that caveat, we're seeing some severe limitations play out in real time. Despite all the handshakes, Russia is actively withholding previously promised Su-35 stealth fighters from Tehran's skies. And they're just abstaining from UN Security Council votes instead of actually vetoing resolutions against Iran. On the flip side, you've got a furious Iran heavily criticizing Russia in state media for the lack of support during recent escalations. Tehran flat out refuses to transfer its enriched uranium to Moscow out of sheer distrust. So yes, they might share illicit networks for things like smuggling and money laundering, but the mutual suspicion is incredibly deep.
So, as analysts, we really have to define this accurately. What we're looking at is a classic marriage of convenience. Listen, Iran is not a Russian proxy. A proxy implies subservience and control, and Russia simply doesn't have that over Tehran. Instead, picture two pariah states, totally isolated on the world stage, who tactically and desperately need each other right now without sharing actual core values or a mutual defense pact.
Moving on to Section 3, the Gulf's strategic divide.
Now let's look at how the Gulf Cooperation Council is handling all this. Because honestly, they are completely split. We're seeing two vastly different playbooks emerge. First, you have the traditionalist approach championed by Oman and Qatar. Their strategy leans heavily on appeasement, keeping open diplomatic channels with Tehran and avoiding direct confrontation. But in stark contrast stands the revolutionary diplomacy of the United Arab Emirates. The UAE has taken this bold, uncompromising, hardline defense posture. They're demonstrating a real willingness to sever ties and rapidly adopt cutting-edge, non-traditional military technology to protect their sovereignty.
You might be wondering, why the huge difference? Well, as we always say in geopolitical analysis, geography dictates policy. Just look at Qatar's geographic reality. They literally share the world's largest natural gas field directly with Iran. From a pure survival standpoint, Qatar has absolutely no choice but to engage diplomatically with the Iranian regime. They just can't afford an all-out hot war in their shared waters, regardless of how high the regional threat level gets.
Let's zoom in on that new playbook in Section 4, UAE's Revolutionary Defense Stance. What's really fascinating here is the sheer, unapologetic pragmatism of the UAE. Think about their vital glass skyscrapers and infrastructure. To protect them from missile threats, they didn't just sit around waiting for Washington to step in. No, they actively went out and acquired modern, battle-tested anti-drone technology straight from Ukraine. Even more astonishingly, reports indicate they received Israeli Iron Dome batteries smack in the middle of a regional war. They completely broke Gulf Protocol by being the only ones to close Iranian embassies on their soil, and they're openly doubling down on alliances with both the US and Israel. It's a strictly results-oriented defense policy.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, the Future Security Architecture.
So, what does this all mean for the future? We are watching the formation of a massive new strategic axis, built right now on 3 very clear steps. Step 1 for these nations is acknowledging the harsh reality, the very real possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran. Step 2 is responding to that by forming a powerful Sunni regional coalition, pulling together the military and economic weight of Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. And Step 3, this is the really fascinating part, is integrating Pakistan. The presence of Pakistani troops currently on Saudi soil isn't just about training. Analysts actually view it as a literal down payment on a future shared nuclear umbrella to establish hardcore deterrence.
All right, let's pull all of this together. Here's your crystal clear executive summary of the 3 distinct security doctrines now governing the Middle East. First up, we have the pragmatic shield, featuring the UAE and Israel, entirely focused on hardline military tech integration. Second is the nuclear umbrella, bringing together Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan, leaning on massive deterrence via allied nuclear capability. And finally, the traditionalists, like Oman and Qatar, who are relying on appeasement and diplomatic engagement to weather the storm. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really pivotal question to chew on. Will these fractured, entirely self-reliant new alliances successfully create a balance of power to contain regional threats? Or, by independently pursuing advanced tech and nuclear umbrellas, are they unwittingly igniting the Middle East's most dangerous arms race yet? It's a lot to think about. Thank you to all the officials and analysts for joining today's briefing. Definitely keep this matrix in mind as you watch the headlines, because the ground beneath the Middle East has fundamentally shifted. See you next time.